So I wanted to do a little video, I think, kind of speculating about the future of modelling, and maybe you could share some of your thoughts in the comments as well. For me, I think you can't really talk about modelling and the advances that have happened in modelling without two companies, one of them Line 6 and the other one Fractal. First of all, Line 6, I think, alongside Boss, are kind of the first people to have done mainstream, I'd say, attempts at modelling, you know. So Boss first of all brought their thing out, Cosm modelling, and then Line 6 brought out the Axis, the AMP, and that was kind of the first AMP modelling, you know, and they've both done AMP modelling and kind of pedal modelling as well from there. You know, Digitech as well, who are now, you know, sort of key members of the Digitech team now work for Line 6 in DSP Victoria. Certainly part of this, I think, Sony as well. Probably a lot of kind of the rack companies, you know, that are doing stuff. So whether that's Eventide and people like that. But the AMP modelling side of things, I think the idea, like Line 6 or people from Line 6 have specifically credited Fractal with the inception of where the Helix would come from, because it was made clear that there wasn't appetite for an expensive modeler done as well as you could at the time with the Axfex Standard and the Axfex Ultra. From there, you know, people got used to the idea that actually this modeling thing could for sure be something that was going somewhere, rather than it was just sort of a cheap, disposable kind of piece of gear like potentially the earlier modeling devices might have been, like the Pod or the mainstream stuff. Now, I think we are probably about to see, this is a bit of a weird prediction, but I think because, so the FM9 has been out now for a long time, relatively in the tech world, and yet people still can't get hold of them, I think because of chip shortages and stuff like that. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to see a slowdown in the world of developing modelers, because the stuff that they need to get their hands on to make this sort of thing is difficult to get hold of. This is across the board. You know, Neural DSP had trouble getting parts to build quad cortex. Clearly the FM9, they're not finding those easy to make. You can get the FM3 and the Axfex 3, but for whatever reason, I think we might not see some significant new hardware for a little while, because, or this parts shortage will necessarily create some other products that are slightly different. Potentially, I guess that could go the other way as well. If there are alternative kind of chips or alternative whatever, then maybe we'll see things go down that route. Things that I think that would be interesting that we still have not seen. So both Fractal and Line 6 do these synth things, and both Fractal and Line 6 have MIDI inputs. Now, as far as I'm aware, no guitar amp modeler has ever been controllable. So you couldn't play actual notes on these synths with like a MIDI keyboard. Although on the Fractal you can sequence stuff, so you've got like a sequencer and you've got MIDI capability. You can't just literally play in with the synth. So I think at some point a company should tackle this. I think it would be possible, and I think it would kind of be an easy thing to market. You know, just show a video of someone actually playing the synths. So there are software synths on these things, you know, the 3-note generator or the synth block in Fractal. So to be able to play one of those with a MIDI keyboard, I think that would be slightly interesting and something that no one has done yet. I predict that at some point that might be a thing. I think as well, Line 6 and Fractal don't have the ability for anyone to connect with phones or wirelessly. Kemper, in some of their later things, they've managed to kind of crack this by putting in kind of wireless devices and this sort of thing, and Bluetooth. And so now people are able to access the Kemper editor with their phones. Neural DSP obviously have had the advantage of coming out slightly later with this stuff. The cloud capabilities are there for Neural DSP, but they don't have any sort of editor yet. It's all on screen. Now, I think Headrush probably deserve a bunch of credit for getting the touchscreen device out first rather than quad cortex. I don't know if that's the way that people are going to go or not. To me, it seems semi-useful, but also semi-not, because so many of the Line 6 or Fractal people that I speak to and interact with online use desktop editors anyway, and I think a desktop editor is at least as useful as a touchscreen. I think for a lot of people, to be able to edit wirelessly with an iPad or a phone might be more useful than an actual touchscreen on the device itself. Let me know your thoughts on the touchscreen, whether it's for you or not. I had a quad cortex, as you know, for a while, but I didn't really find the touchscreen was particularly any faster than using buttons. It wasn't something that particularly improved my experience as a user. I think it's fair to say Helix were ahead of the game with their user interface when that came out in 2015. I think at some point someone is going to supersede that, whether it's Line 6 themselves or someone else, I'm not sure. Neural obviously copied their homework on that and made a device which looks more or less the same and used the same kind of 2 signal path thing for whatever reason. I don't know why they chose to do that, but it's pretty clearly copying that, especially given that it uses the same amount of blocks and the same potential on both signal paths, which is a strange choice. I think also Kemper, Neural and AxeFX to some extent can all do the kind of profiling / tone matching thing now, and whether that's the thing that other people bring along for the ride, I'd be interested to see. That might be one of those kind of features that everyone in 5 years expects to be on every modeling device. You never know, that could be the case. What I'd be interested in, I think, would be this kind of modeling technology but put into something like the Line 6 DT50 or the Line 6 DT25, or, you know, not Line 6, anything, but put to use in a more traditional kind of guitar amp setup, you know, where you might have an actual really decent combo. You might actually have a tube power amp if needed. You might even have some combination of tube preamps, but something a bit of a modeling kind of digital hybrid. I think there could be an appetite for that still. I think the DT25 and DT50 were a little bit ahead of their time in some ways, but certainly having an actual proper quality cabinet and stuff, as opposed to the kind of cheaper manufacturer of like the Catalyst or the Katana, I think that might be a route that would be useful. You know, if you were going through a really substantial cab and a really substantial guitar speaker, potentially I think people would find the switch between modeling and a real amp a little bit easier. Do you have any ideas for where you see the future of modeling going? Perhaps we see it even going more kind of plug-in based. I think Neural DSP have kind of made big inroads to the kind of metal scene with the use of plugins, and you know, you read online, quite a lot of people might have switched from amps to plugins in general, particularly if they're kind of not gigging, and particularly if they're not necessarily playing all the time. You know, to be able to just plug in a laptop and you don't have any particular hardware or anything, you just put on a plugin and you go, right, I'm in. Be interesting to see Fractal step back into the kind of plugin space. I think the plugin space actually for Line 6, where they made Helix specifically native, that is still leaps ahead of anything else out there in my opinion, because you can use your Helix tones on any device in, you know, Helix native, the full capability of a full Helix, and even more actually, because you can kind of set it to compatibility mode where you can have an unlimited Helix. I think that's still an aspiration that I think that other companies should aim for. You know, like if you could have your Fractal algorithms run in your PC, I think that would be something that people would really, really dig. Equally, you know, to have the neural plugins on the quad cortex as opposed to this kind of separation of things, I think that could be something that people get real benefit from. Certainly for me, I find like that knowing that I can use exactly the same tones and the same algorithms in Helix native as I can get on any of my Line 6 devices, I think that's quite a powerful thing, and still one of the bigger innovations I think within the modeling world. So let me know your thoughts on that. Do you see the future of modeling? How do you see it going? I think maybe MIDI implementation, you know, MIDI clock syncing and being able to do looping and stuff and actually sync up devices properly is a bit of a blind spot for the Helix, particularly with some of the newer kind of delays and stuff. I think there is a little bit of a gap there. You know, more advanced looper stuff like quantized loopers, that's something that has generally not come over to the modeling world, except for I think the quad cortex have managed to sort that. So it'll be interesting to see whether there's some progress in that area as well. But again, let me know your thoughts about where you see the future of modeling. Is it all going to be kind of going native, do you think? Do you foresee any of these companies doing anything new quickly, or do you think the supply shortage is going to have an impact on that? I think it probably could. Are you expecting big things soon? Also, the miniaturization of stuff, like, I think this is kind of as small as you'd want to get with modeling devices, in my opinion. Smaller than that, I think, is not super useful. The FM3 is obviously quite small, the Quad Cortex is quite small as well, and then you've got kind of the FM9 and the Helix, which are slightly bigger, but I think more suitable for the actual kind of gig stuff. I don't know, let me know your thoughts. Cheers.